All right, everyone, we are going to continue our discussion here, and just like we did on the DLP side, we're going to break the information protection piece here. We're going to break this down into two separate sections as well, because again, got to wait for that Microsoft Minute. Replication is a piece of the puzzle. Nothing really too big to be worried about, but as we have said and what we have done in the past, we're going to go over to the Compliance Center, and we're going to pull up the new piece here, which is, scroll all the way down, and we're going to look at information protection. Okay, information protection is going to take us to our this portal here. Now mine's still loading up here, but it's coming up. When it does fully come up, we'll see here there is something that I do want you to turn on here. This is something that we're going to have to play around with. When we're looking at information protection, we need to be able to secure our data when it's in use, no matter where it's at. And one of the things that we have to be able to look at here is for Office Online. We've been using a lot of Office Online pieces here, but in order to do so, we need to make sure that in order to use the information protection labels, sensitivity labels, we need to be able to publish them to Office Online as well as the Office apps. So what we're going to do here is we're going to click this little button here that says turn on. And that's it. That's all we do. Once that happens there, it's going to kind of go in the back end, and it will come out by the time we start playing around with these labels. Again, we're going to need time in between, so we're just going to click that little button there. Now, one other thing too is, excuse me, if we come over to the audit over here, you may have some tenants do, some tenants don't. You'll see up here there's a big blue bar that says to enable it. This is something that you should enable. It takes about 24 hours for it to turn on if it is not already enabled. It very well may be enabled for you. Like I said, I can't really find a rhyme or reason, but you can see in here is that the new search preview, which is showing in here. Now, again, we'll worry about this later on, but for now, just make sure that that is enabled on there. Jump back down to information protection. Scrolling down here, we got some ribbons here where locations where labels were applied. It says there are 5 places in Exchange. That's kind of strange. Well, we'll look at that here in time. But, excuse me, again, let's go over here to the labels. All right, now you'll notice that on here is that we have several different labels. These are automatically created. Microsoft creates these out of the box. We have lots of different ones, and they're actually in a priority order here, as we have highly confidential, confidential, general, public, and personal. You see that the general, confidential, and highly confidential all have little carrots next to them, and if we click it, we'll see that we have specific roles on these. Oops, didn't mean to do that. I want to click the little, there we go. All employees, trusted people. These are crazy. What do they do? There's a lot of stuff with these. So we're just going to expand them all. There we go. Okay, so we have a grand total of, I think there's 11. Well, actually, there's 12 because we got to include 0. So there's 12 labels in total. We have this highly confidential, confidential, personal, public, general. These are very vague terms. And there's also a couple things that I want to bring to your attention. These are all for files and emails, or otherwise known as items, as they are determined on here. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to take these labels here. We're going to use them. We're going to hijack a couple of them because really I don't care too much about all of these here. We're not going to publish all of these out here to the organization because they're just far too many. But what we're going to do here is we're going to do a public, confidential, highly confidential, and we're going to create a top secret one. So if we look at the public, go ahead and click on it here. And if you see right here, they actually give a description of it. It says business data that is specifically prepared and approved for public consumption. Now again, I didn't touch any of this stuff. But if we click this little option here to edit label, we will see here, oh, we have the new ones, which is totally cool because we actually have colors of labels that we can kind of place these on here. So this one here, we'll put it as green. The name will be public. The description, now this is the user's description, so they will see this in their endpoints. We can put an admin label on here or a description. This is just for us in the portal. No users would actually ever see that. We're going to go ahead and put a color. Put green. Sounds good to me. Now you'll see we have items, groups and sites, and schematized data assets. And these two here I am unable to check. Well, there are actually some things that we have to do in order to protect these. Now we're going to go through this process. This is going to be just a little bit complicated. So we're going to right click, open this up, and there is an option on here where we have to, if we scroll all the way down, we have to right here. So first we have to connect, and we have to do this through PowerShell. There is no way to do this globally with the GUI or the user interface here. We have to do this through PowerShell. Now here's the thing about PowerShell is I love it. However, it can be a little bit wonky to connect with. So before we jump into the the general label here, we're actually going to assign this, or we're going to create this so we can let that replicate in the backend. So the first thing we have to do is execute Azure AD Label Sync. So what we're going to do here is we're going to, it says follow the instructions to enable labels support, which again we're going to do, and then you need to synchronize your labels. So we're going to right click, connect. We have to connect to the Security and Compliance PowerShell. Now here's the fun one that we have to do here. So we have to do several different things. The Security and Compliance PowerShell is actually utilized inside of the Exchange Online PowerShell. So what we have to do, and as I'm going to open up PowerShell. Now again, PowerShell is only available on Windows devices, of course. So what we're going to do is, if you do have a Mac environment, you can download. I believe PowerShell has a module for Mac OS. I can't speak on that. I'm not much of a Mac person. But when you are in Windows, if you're at least Windows 10, you're going to have PowerShell just readily available. Now, I always recommend pulling up PowerShell, and I just type in PowerShell in the search there, and it'll pull up with Windows PowerShell. We do not want the ISE. Now you can't see it here because I'm on the other screen. But we do not want ISE, we just want Windows PowerShell. We're going to right click at it and run as an administrator. And as you see, my screen hole, it just went dark because UAC just popped up. And you will see we're under the administrator context. So it should say administrator Windows PowerShell. Now the first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to take, I'm trying to move this around here, make it easy. We're going to hit where it says import module. We're going to go ahead and hit copy. Go over to PowerShell, paste it in there. Just a simple right click will paste it in there. You can also right click on the banner up here and do edit, paste, whichever works for you. Then we're going to go ahead and hit enter. And it's going to say was not found. So now we've found that the import module, so the Exchange Online Manage module, was not found. So how do we have to do it? We have to install it first. So again, the modules inside of PowerShell are very, without sounding silly, but they are modular. They're designed to be all over the place, and we can install them in lots of different ways. So Microsoft actually comes out with new ways of doing it here, where it's just going to be a very simple way of doing it here. We have this PSWMan. There's lots of different ways that we can do it here too. But we're not going to worry about all of this. This can easily just get really crazy here. We're going to go down to where it says install Exchange Online PowerShell module. And in an elevated PowerShell, we're going to hit copy where it says install dash module space dash name space Exchange Online Management. We're going to make sure we're in elevated. We have to be in elevated permission set. So what it's going to do here is that it's going to go out to the internet. And it's actually going to go to GitHub. Microsoft owns GitHub. And it's going to go out there and it's going to find this repository for the Exchange Online Management. It's going to pull down the PowerShell commands, as you can see on here. PowerShell get, it requires new Git provider, blah, 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 blah. You may see this, you may not, depending on how up to date your system is. But we're going to do a simple yes. Hit enter. And it is running in the background here where it's going to take it and install it. Now, one of the questions that it has here, and this is a little bit of an, we'll call it a misnomer here, is that it says it's an untrusted repository. Now, PowerShell, as we know, is a Microsoft thing. GitHub is owned by Microsoft as well. However, the problem they're saying is that they're untrusted is because this repository by default, they're always untrusted. Everything is always untrusted. And that is by design because, again, we want it to be safe. But in this instance here, we can trust them and hit yes. And you can see it's downloading the package and installing it. It takes all of maybe 5 seconds for it to install. Now, I like to keep my screen nice and clear, so I do a CLS on it. And if we go up, we can see that import-module Exchange Online Management. We hit that. It still can't be loaded because scripts are disabled now. So now what we have to do is a set-execution policy-unrestricted. So exactly as you see here on my screen. Now you may not get that error where the scripts are disabled. We're going to go ahead and hit yes to this. Now, if we run the import module, nothing will happen, which means it ran, which is good. Because we can now come back here. So we've done the import module. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to connect -IPPS session user principal name, and then we're going to type it in. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull up this. I'm going to do connect-IPPS session. And if you want, you can just type in IPPSS and then hit tab, and then it'll automatically work out there for you. Then we hit space-user, and you can just type in US, tab that out, user principal name. Then we're going to type in the administrator on our tenant. So I'm going to do pocket square professor.live. Now it is not going to want our password on here because we have to do that in a secure manner. And you'll see here is that it pops up. Hey, this all looks very familiar, right? Type in our password, and there we go. And we will see here that your connection has been redirected to compliance.protection.outlook.com. There we go. And its basic auth to OAuth conversion is true. So again, we're in modern authentication. Now you will notice here that we are connected. So again, I like to do another CLS. I like to clear the screen. I like to keep my screen tidy. So now we have done that. We come back to the last one here to do this execute Azure AD label sync. We're going to copy that, paste it, hit enter. And then it's done. Now at this point here, we just wait. So what's going to happen here is that these groups and sites that we have open up over here, this will enable for us. The schematized data assets, we need to enable those, but we're not going to do with these. Those aren't anything we're going to be, those are outside the scope of what we're going to be dealing here with this course. Again, this is just a beginner boot course, or boot camp course here. So we're not really necessarily concerned about the schematized data assets. So at that point there, we have the PowerShell modules have been installed. We have done the execute Azure AD label sync. Now what the heck does that even do? Well, what this is Microsoft used to have something called AIP, which is Azure Information Protection. That has since been moved over to MIP, which is Microsoft Information Protection. And it's all being consolidated inside of the Compliance Center. It used to be in Azure. Now what we're doing here with this command is we're syncing those labels and enabling as MIP as the authoritative source. AIP can be an authoritative source, however, most of it has been deprecated, and that's what it is by default, which is why we have to execute this label sync here. So that's happening in the back end, and honestly, we're just going to close out of PowerShell. We can close out of these that we've opened up here, because again, we don't care anymore. That's done. That is working in the back end. At some point here in the next, I don't know, we'll say a couple hours here, this will be available to us, but for now, we're just going to keep it on items. Now, to kind of reiterate what we just did here is we went into this label here, which is the public label. We gave it that green mark on it, light green. Hit next. We are on items. We're going to keep that checked in there. So this is going to be for emails, Office files, and Power BI. And then we're going to hit next. Now, here are the actions that we can do here. This particular one here is not doing anything. We can have it encrypt. We can have it mark items. We'll get to that here in just a minute. But right now, this public label is doing literally nothing. There's no action that it's doing. So why do we care about this? Well, remember, this is that folksonomy or taxonomy, depending on, I guess, however you look at it. But we are just labeling things as public. If something is public, we don't really want to protect it because, again, it's public. We don't want to encrypt it. We don't probably want to mark it. We could, maybe, but again, that's not necessarily the easiest thing for users to comprehend. But if there's labeled as public and they're able to send it and do whatever they want with it, that's what we want it to do. And that's it. We want to make this as simple as possible. So what we're going to do here is so we looked at this general label here, and if we just kind of continue, we have no auto labeling enabled. Groups and sites, obviously we cannot do anything because that has not been enabled yet on the tenant. So we can't do anything here. Hit the next one here, auto labeling for schematized data assets. Can't do anything here. Again, that has not been enabled on the tenant. And then essentially we finish. So we're really doing nothing. This is nothing more than a marking label. And I'll explain all of this when we actually look at it from the user's side. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to go through a couple of these labels here, but first I want to create a label and we're going to make it top secret because this is going to be the end-all be-all, and only one person in the organization is going to be able to have access to this label, okay? So we're going to hit create label. We're going to call this one top secret is the name. The display name will also be, so this is what users see. This is what we see in the admin portal. This is what users see on their side. Description is utmost secure and secret data. We're going to put this one as a big red one. We're going to hit next. Now again, we aren't doing groups and sites just yet. We're going to do that in time. But for now, we're going to do items. Next. We are going to both encrypt and mark items. Now we're going to dive into the nitty-gritty. What can we do with these labels? So the first section here is around encryption. I have two options presented to me immediately where I can configure encryption settings, which obviously is all of these down here, or I can remove the encryption. So an option that we have here is that if it is passing through, let's say, a DLP, we can actually have a decryption label that it gets slapped on there, and it decrypts it. It removes all of the encryption pieces of it. There's a lot of things that we can do with this, of course, but really the most part, and again, remember, this is a top secret one here. We want to configure this to be encrypted, okay? Because we want it to be persistent. We want it to be secure, okay? Now, the next three options in these drop downs here are, do we want to assign the permissions now or let the users decide? So we have an option here where we can let the users decide the permissions. That gets rid of pretty much everything. Or we assign the permissions ourselves. So administrators assign a set permissions, or users can assign permissions. Users assigning permissions is a cool concept. However, in practice, it is one of those things that is very difficult because users don't understand IRM. They don't understand the information rights management pieces of it here. They don't know who should have access and who should not have access. Microsoft is in the process of upgrading this to make it a little bit easier for them. But again, at the end of the day, allowing users to select permissions and such is a little bit complicated. It's good intentions, of course, but it's just one of those theory and practices that we just don't see too frequently. So we're going to assign permissions now. We can have content expiration, if we want, as well, on a specific date or a number of days after the label is applied. So what we can say here is when we'll say 90 days after the label is applied. Remember, this is top secret here. 90 days after the label is applied, content expires. The access expires to the content, and nobody will have access to it. So it's kind of like a James Bond self-destruct scenario. This is not utilized as frequently, and you can see right here is that it's not utilized as frequently. And the reason being is because we don't necessarily want to expire content. But we could. We could also have a content expiration on, let's just say we have this big project that's coming down like Project X, which is something we've used here in the past. We have Project X coming down the pipeline there, and everything labeled Project X is all going to be public on, this date. We'll just say, January 1st, it's going to be public. So we can have that kind of expire at that point there, so it's all on, it's expired at that date. There's a lot of different things that we can do here. However, for the scope of what we're doing here, we're just going to set never. And then we also have offline access. This one is, as the name implies here, is that you have to, when you sign in to try to access this document, you have to be online. You cannot be cached. So we can have that set to always, which always allows offline access. never, which obviously never allows offline access, or for a period of time. So is that your device can be, we'll say, offline for 5 days, 7 days, whatever, and that's only you can access it for there. Again, since this is just a lab, we don't want to get too complicated here. We're just going to keep it as always. So the permissions are set top secret here. Now, the way that we have top secret permissions set is, here's the information rights management piece of it. So first we have the groups that we assign permissions to. We can add all users and group in my organization. So if I were to click on that, you see that it has my entire tenant. So this is everybody inside of my tenant, including guests. So this is important to understand, is that this one actually does include guests. So guests can come into the tenant and they can have access to this particular content if they want to be included in here. Now, that may or may not be a good thing. It really depends. And that's one thing you really, really have to understand here, is because the entire tenant includes guests. And if you have guests coming in, interacting with SharePoint and such, well, they may have access to this. And that may be a hole in your security posture. So it depends. But again, this is top secret. We don't want everybody in the organization. No, no, no. We definitely don't want that. Do we want any authenticated user? Now, if I hover over this little eye here, is that we have an email account that's authenticated by Azure AD, or a federated social provider is authenticated by a Microsoft account or uses a one-time passcode. Now, that's only for email. So we're going to put email off to the side here. But if I were to put this on a document, you have to have an email that's authenticated by Azure AD. So you have to be a guest. You have to be another Microsoft 365 customer where you have your own Azure AD. That is somebody who is authenticated. You also could be a Outlook account, a Hotmail account, Live account. Those accounts, those are Microsoft accounts. You can do that there too. So this one here is very open with that mindset of, okay, well, this is top secret. No, we don't want that one either, of course. Specific email addresses or domains. Well, this could be external. Internal and external. We can just add specific email addresses inside of the organization. Sure. Same thing with domains. However, this is more typically used for external. Like here is a vendor. Maybe we have a specific label for vendor X, and we just want to add them as it so they have access to it. That's cool. We can do that. What we can do here is maybe something like this. We can just do a user or group. So in this instance here, we can have a specific user. So let's just say myself. Now, I have full access to this, as we see here. I'm co-author. I don't have full access, but I'll show you here if we hit choose permissions. Here are the permission sets that are available to me. I can view content, view the rights, edit content, save, print, copy and extract, reply, reply all, forward. I do not have the ability to edit rights. That means I do not have the ability to change the permissions of the label. Same thing with export content here. I do not have the ability to export that to maybe like a PDF or something. Nope. Macros, sure, got the ability to do, and full control. Now, we have to understand the permission matrix when it comes to creation of documents. When I am a user and I generate a piece of knowledge, I am the co-owner of the document. That is the highest level of permissions here, as co-owner. I am a co-owner automatically. Why? Because I created it. Therefore, I get to change the rights of the document. I have the ability to export it. I have full control over the document. Why? Because I created it. I should. If I put a label on a document that I created and it's, closes me out of the document, that defeats the purpose of having that document. I am always going to be the co-owner of the document. Now we can have other people be co-owners of the document. So in this instance here, because I am the top secret clearance person in the organization, I'm going to give myself co-owner rights to this document. Or whatever is labeled as such. We hit save. You'll see down here where it says M. Allaway, co-owner, and we can edit or can it if we want. But what I'm also going to do here is I also have Geddy Lee inside of here, who is a member of our compliance team. However, he needs to have access to the security piece here, but he does not need to have co-owner. He doesn't need to have co-author. He doesn't need reviewer, but we're going to give him viewer access. He has read-only access to this document. So if we hit save, we have it here is that we can set up a hierarchy. So Geddy Lee here will have viewer access, But me, as the admin, I have co-owner access, and I'm able to do whatever I want with that particular top secret document. So as long as that document is classified as top secret, I'm the one who can do anything to it. But also keep in mind, if I am the creator of that document and I label it, I will have co-owner access as well. But again, that's by design. It's supposed to be that way. So Geddy Lee here has his viewer access. I have co-owner access. We can set this up in many different ways. A common scenario that I would see here is everybody inside of the organization, has viewer access. And we would have everybody in the organization, so this one's pretty broad. Everybody in this one would have viewer. Geddy Lee may have, let's do it this way here. I'll kind of play around with this a little bit easier. We'll give him reviewer access so he can save and edit the content. So Geddy Lee here has reviewer access, and then me as the person, the top secret clearance person, I am co-owner of it because I have complete control over the top secret documents. So with that being said here, everybody in the organization will automatically inherit these viewer permissions. Now, I don't really want to do that because, again, this is a top secret document. It should not be viewed by everybody in the organization. It is eyes only. So we're going to delete that. We want Geddy Lee, and you can give him viewer access is fine. So we've set up kind of a permission set. We can get very crazy here. This is the point. This is probably one of the hardest things to comprehend and kind of plan out when you're doing a label plan, kind of a label deployment, because, well, what about in this circumstance? What about in that circumstance? And blah, 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 blah. And there's a lot of things to think about there, of course. But when it comes down to it, you have to understand that the whole point of this here is to make sure that we are doing things securely, but also as enabling as possible. We want to include the users in on this process here. We don't want to make it difficult for them. So we're going to keep this as is, just like I said, like I have right here. And then we are not going to use double key encryption, but let me explain how that works. So when we're talking about encryption, we're talking about keys, like a PKI or public key infrastructure or some sort of certificates. Okay, so these are encrypted, and we have to be able to decrypt them, of course, right? Well, Microsoft's the one that owns the keys to decrypt these. Now, granted, Microsoft's a very trustworthy company, but if for whatever reason those keys were to be compromised somehow, some way, well, then obviously we just punched a huge hole in our encryption. So Microsoft offers this option here of double key encryption, and it's called also bring your own key. So we have Microsoft's key is the kind of the baseline encryption level on it. We can bring our own key that we only have. We would have to set up a whole PKI environment and a lot of different things as well. But I can bring my own key in there and encrypt it, double encrypt it. So we have Microsoft's key as well as our key. So both of them have to be decrypted in order to have access to this. So we are bringing another level of security onto this if we want. Now, I'll be honest with you, I have only seen this in use in the wild once. But it is an option that's out there for our very security-minded organizations. So here's the encryption. This is the information rights management piece of this. We're going to go ahead and hit next. Now, content marking, headers, footers, watermarks. Yeah, you bet. We're going to put a big old fat watermark on here. Customize this. Top secret. Eyes only. By default, it's 10. I don't know. Let's make it 30. And let's make this, I don't know. We're going to make this hideous. It's going to be big and red. We're going to make it, we'll make it diagonal. It's fine. Top secret, eyes only. Let's save. We can add a header here. We can add a footer as well. I think it's going to look too stupid if we put too much on there. Of course, this top secret eyes only is going to look really stupid anyway. But again, that's going to automatically add it to it, and the users will never, ever question, is this a top secret document or not? Because you will see it there. It's going to be in big red letters. All right. We're going to do that. That's content marking. That one's easy enough. Moving on. Auto labeling. Okay. We're going to take a step here because this is going to be a very big piece of this puzzle here. Auto labeling exists in two formats. We have one way of doing it is from the server side, which is data at rest. So data inside of SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, Exchange, wherever. We can put labels onto those documents as they are placed at rest. It has no user interaction. They put a document, they save it to a SharePoint site, it comes by. Based off of what it finds inside of it, it's going to slap a label on it. the users have zero chance of doing anything to it, okay? This piece that you're looking at right here on the screen is what's called service-side labeling. This is client-side labeling. You can also refer to it as well. So what's happening here is that on the client side, we are going to play around with this here. So we're going to go ahead and put a little toggle switch on it. So this is auto labeling for files and emails as the users are working on them. So this is data in use. Okay, so as I'm typing information in a document in near real time, you will see that it will pop up there and it says, you know, hey, we recommend that you put a label on it, or we're automatically going to put a label on it. Lots of different ways that we can go here. But what are the conditions? So if I break it down, content contains. Now again, this should look very similar to the DLP section that we had. So content contains what? Sensitive info types or trainable classifiers. So again, looking at either one of these here, we can certainly use a trainable classifier. We could certainly use sensitive info types. Since we're in a lab here, I'm just going to use sensitive info type. All right, we only have 265 of these that we can use here with client-side auto labeling, but there still are usual suspects. So we have, let's just say we want to do we're going to do something different here. So I want to do, what makes sense? How about an IP address? Yeah, so do an IP version 4 address. So if it contains an IP version 4 address in here on a confidence level of high, medium, or low, we're going to do low just to make it easy, and we're going to trigger it so we can make sure it triggers all the time. But we're going to do low just for testing purposes. Instant counts, again, same exact as we saw before. If it has any more than 5 on it, we can do that too if we want. There's lots of different ways that we can go about this here, but again, IP version 4, low confidence, looks good. Now, we can automatically apply the label, or we can recommend the users apply the label. So in this instance here, we're going to recommend that the users apply the label. IP address detected. We recommend you place this label on the document or email. Sounds good. So what's going to end up happening is going to little pop up on there, and it's going to say, hey, we recommend you do this. All right, we're going to go ahead and hit next. Again, this looks very familiar with what we saw with the one side here. We're going to do it groups and sites. And when we did the public label here, we have no option. We can't do anything here. Those are still not enabled on the tenant, but we'll go ahead and hit next. Schematize data assets, nothing there. Hit finish. Then we're going to create the label. Now this one here is going to be, once it's done, we want to make sure that it's in the correct order. So we are not going to create a policy yet. Okay, we do not want to do anything, so don't just click next. We just hit do not create a policy. Okay, so we have it here as we have the order and personal. Now as you go, the higher the order, the highest in terms of, well, it's called sensitivity. Top secret obviously is the top, highly confidential, general, public, personal, all of these personal and public, they didn't do anything. So we don't really care. They're in terms of order here. But the important piece that comes into play is that if we want to downgrade the label, if we go down a level, that is more important than going up. It's always easy to upgrade a level, but it is more difficult to downgrade a level. So, all right, we have this group here of labels that are available to us. We looked at the personal. Let's just, for just sake of everything on here, what we'll do here is we'll look at the highly confidential, and we'll look at this specified people. So again, if I were to put this label on to a document, what would it give me? So it says highly confidential data that requires protection and can only be viewed by specific people with limited rights. There is encryption on this here too. So we're going to edit the label. Again, specified people, looks fine. Items, we're going to encrypt and mark. Let the users assign the permission. So they are assigning the permission. So in Outlook, if I were to put this label on it, do not Do not forward is the option that is available to them. Encrypt only, that is another option that's available. And then in Word, PowerPoint, Excel, prompt users to specify permissions. Now this is the new thing, and like I said, we'll look at this here too from the user's experience. That's what they're doing. Content marking, classified as highly confidential, is just a footer on there. We are not auto-labeling here. I'm just going to cancel because we didn't make any changes. We're just going to cancel. So again, feel free to look through these here if you want. Again, that's completely up to you. I think it's kind of boring. Let's actually get to some stuff here. Now if we come over here to label policies, we'll go ahead and click on that. And we have this global sensitivity label policy here. We don't want this. We're going to delete this. So that's going to go away. And it may not go away immediately. It's going to be a little bit of time here. We're going to hit Publish Label. And we're going to choose which ones to publish. Now we want to publish this to the greater population of people. So we want everybody in the organization to have everything except this top secret label. That's only for the top secret eyes only person, which is going to be me. So we're going to hit Add, and we see here's all of the labels that are published to everybody. We're going to put this to everybody. We can choose a specific user or group if we want. Hit Next. Now here's where we can start getting a little bit granular. So we can have an option here is that we must provide a justification to remove or lower classification. So in this instance here, if we need to go down, remember that order I was just talking about? If we need to go from like 12 down to 10 or wherever, well, you better make sure that you put a justification in there. By default, you are unable to do so. So we want to, remember, we want to enable users to be able to do this, but we want to justify. We can require users to apply the labels to their documents, which means they are unable to save their documents until they put a label on it. I don't like doing this here because this is kind of a problem, and it kind of is very right in their face. Again, enablement is what I lean towards. However, this is an option. I have done this for customers before. Is that, hey, you are required, or because you are a specific group of people, you are required to label your information, whereas the greater population's not. That's okay too, but it depends. So in this instance here, we're going to require users, we are not going to require them to apply labels to their emails or their Power BI. Same concept there. We can, I don't have one here, but we could spin up like a SharePoint intranet site or communication site, and we can show, here's some FYI, how-tos, videos, bunch of stuff there. You know, there are lots of options there. We can provide it. Now we don't have one here, of course. So we're going to go ahead and hit Next. Here's the default. We have an option where we can put everything as default. I have had a customer in the past where they put everything at the very top level, highly confidential or whatever it is, and then make people downgrade. That's a nightmare. I don't recommend it. Do not automatically put a label on there. Certain circumstances, it makes sense, but in most circumstances, it doesn't. And for this sake of lab, what we're doing here, we're going to leave it off. We can do this to emails if we wish, but again, in my recommendation, not a good idea. We don't want to put huge roadblocks and huge barriers in front of people. We want them to label their information. We will come back around them with these auto-labeling pieces. Power BI, again, we're going to skip that one as well. Now, we're going to give this a name called PSP-all-user label policy. Looks good. Hit Next, and then we're going to submit. Now, the difference here is that when we are talking about labels is that we created all of those labels. However, the labels are the actions and what we do with the stuff. The policies are actually what publishes it out to the users. That's what makes it available for the end users to use. So when we create a policy here, as you see here, this is why we got to wait. It can take up to 24 hours. And as I said, that is very much the case. Hit Done here. You'll see we have this policy here. So here is the label policy for everybody. So what we're going to do here as well is we're going to, remember I got that top secret label. I'm just going to publish that top secret label. Because remember, everybody in the organization has all of the other 11 or 12. This is going to be the last one here, but I'm only going to publish this to myself. I'm going to hit Next. And we'll follow suit with the rest here to provide a justification, yes. And we're not going to put a default. We're going to keep it pretty much as it is. We're going to call this PSP dash top secret label policy. Looks good there. Now, these are additive, meaning that when I publish this out here, that everybody will have these initial group of them, the 11 or 12 of them there, and then I will have 13 or whatever. I don't remember exactly however many. What do we have over here? 12. So we have 13 total. So everybody will have 12 labels. I will have 13. But only I will have 13 because that's all I published them to. Now at this point here, it's going in the back end and it's just going and searching for stuff, for information, and it's publishing it out to our users to be able to utilize inside of our apps, inside of our Office Online, wherever. So what we're also going to do here, this is the final piece that we'll be talking about for this section, for this part 1, remember there's going to be a multi-part here, is that we're also going to do auto-labeling. And we talked about auto-labeling from the client side. We're going to create an auto-labeling policy for the service side. So this is going to be the Office 365 side, so the data at rest. So we're going to create an auto-labeling policy. We can have templates, just as we did with DLP here. So we can follow our DLP practices if we wish, but we're going to do a custom. And we're going to call this one, since the other one we used was IPv4, we're going to do IPv6 auto-labeling policy. Now we can do this to many different scenarios here, but I am going to uncheck Exchange. Keep in mind, all right, this is important. Exchange is not indexed at rest. So when these information, so if this auto labeling piece is going around, it is only going to apply labels as email jumps through the hub transport layer. When it's at rest, if you never ever send that email that is stuck there inside of your database in your mailbox, it will never be auto labeled unless you send it. It has to be through the hub transport layer. That's the only way, and that's by design. Exchange has been like that for a very, very long time. It is non-indexed at rest. Whereas SharePoint and OneDrive, however, are absolutely indexed at rest, and that's where we're going to be playing around with here. So we have SharePoint and OneDrive. We can choose specific sites if we want, exclude some, and again, this looks very familiar to the DLP side of things. We're just going to keep everything on, because why not? I'm going to hit Next. We're just going to create common rules here. If we go over, we can go crazy with some advanced rules. This is if we want to separate between OneDrive and SharePoint, whereas common rules here will just basically kind of make it that is unified in one, which we're going to do here since it's going to be the same. So the new rule is IPv6. Looks good. Content contains. Add. Remember, this all looks very familiar, so none of this should be necessarily super new if you've been watching the others. I'm going to do IP version 6. I'm going to do low confidence just to make sure it hits. We can add an exception. We can also do it if the content is shared. So this one's helpful here. Is that we can go is that if it's at rest, that's fine. But if it's being shared, then we'll put the label on. We can do that. There's other ways of doing that as well. So adding the condition, we're going to leave it as it is. Just IPv6, low confidence, any number of instances, and that's it. We're not going to put any exceptions on. Hit save. Next. Okay, well, what label are we going to put on it? Well, I think this should be highly confidential. Looks good to me. We're going to hit next. So the next piece here is, this is a new setting on here. It's automatically turn on the policy if not modified. So we're going to turn this on, of course, but we can't just immediately flip the switch. And the reason being is if we accidentally made a little flub, we could absolutely encrypt every piece of information inside of Office 365, which would be very, very, very bad. We don't want to do that. So what we will do here is we run it in simulation mode. So when it runs in simulation mode, it's going to say, here's everything that would be turned on or labeled if we were to turn this policy on. And then we can turn it on after it has run. Now it takes generally maybe about a day or so to run. It depends on how much data and such. In our test environment, not very much. So this should not take long at all. So we're going to go ahead and hit next. And we're going to keep this policy just like this. Pretty simple. IP version 6, apply it to everything, and we're going to create that policy. So what will end up happening here when this is done, once it finishes here too first, once it's done, then we're going to take some information and just kind of work through these here. But while that is being created, why don't we create it over here, and I'll create a new incognito here where we can do IPv6 examples. And I'm just going to snag an IP version 6. Here's an example of an IP version 6. We're just going to copy that. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to place this inside of, let's put it in a SharePoint site. I think we still have a SharePoint site we can use. If not, we can put it inside of OneDrive just as easily. Let's see here. We have Project X. How about that? That's inside of Teams there, so we can try Project X here. So we go over here to Documents. And again, if you have not, or if this is new to you and you have not watched the Modern Workplace one, I do recommend you do that because we had some great examples of things inside of here. We're going to create this new document. It's going to be a new Word document. And we're going to, just going to be called Document 1 for the time being. It's going to be IP version 6 equals, and we're going to paste that in there. Let's paste it plain text just to make it easy. Okay, so that is in there. We're good. We'll go ahead and close that out. We will see Document 1 on here. Let's rename this one here to IPv6 test. So what's going to happen here is this information protection auto-labeling policy is starting to look through everything, and it's going to find this Project X label. And hopefully we got the sequencing of events all working here, and it will find it on there. And it's going to say, okay, well, we're going to put this label on this document. And that's the way it's essentially going to work out. So as you see here, please wait for simulation complete. It's going to take some time, a couple hours, and then we'll get some items to review. And then when it's finished there, we can turn on the policy. So for now, this is what we're going to do. We're just going to leave it as such. Make sure you put this IPv6 test policy, just a copy of it inside of a document, inside of either SharePoint or OneDrive, it doesn't matter. So we can look at the information in the policy here. We have the labels have been published out to people, and the easiest way to test, Office Online generally goes first, but it may take some time. As you can see up here, I have this little button here that says sensitivity. If we click on it here, you'll see that we have sensitive information. Now, I do not have my top secret one yet, so we're not fully published out there yet. So we're not going to touch those until everything is resolved and all the ripples in the pond have smoothed out. All right, with that being said, that is everything we are doing here for this particular section. For part 1, we're going to test out the user's experience and look through all of the pieces here when we take in part 2 here. But at this time here, give it a couple hours and let it replicate out there. It could take up to 24, and I know that that's kind of annoying here, but that's just what we have to do. If we want to be able to use these functionalities, that's just the name of the game. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and stop there for the time being. We will pick back up here in part 2. Thank you for your time on this one here. We'll see you over on the next.